Okay, so we'll start the session. Dheeraj, you're there?
Yeah, hi Vikas.
Yeah, hi.
Good evening.
Good evening. So first of all, I would like to thank all the participants for taking their time out from their busy schedule and joining the call today. Once again, I would like to thank everyone. Let me introduce myself. So my name is Vikas Agarwal. I'm the founder of AIF and PMS Experts India. And some of you who might be attending our webinar at the regular interval, they might be familiar with the fact that at AIF and PMS Experts, we keep organizing these knowledge-based sessions, and it is our endeavor to sort of educate more investors and share wisdoms of the portfolio managers with all the investors as a community. And therefore, we keep inviting industry experts and domain experts. So today we have with us Mr. Dheeraj Sachdev. Well, I happen to know him for quite some time because we both have worked in the previous organization, HSBC, where I spent about 5 years, and Dheeraj was there for more than a decade. So let me just take a minute quickly to introduce the group first. So Roha Group, they started managing public money since 2018. So they are the SEBI registered portfolio managers, and they have both the licenses as a vehicle. So they have alternate investment funds and the portfolio management services. They started up with AIF, and now they also have PMSs in their on their platform. Let me also introduce Dheeraj here. So Dheeraj is a chartered accountant. He's also cost accountant, and he has over 25 years of rich experience in the area of investments, more particularly on equity side. Prior to this, he has worked with large organizations like ASK, HDFC, and HSBC. I spent good amount of time with HSBC, where he delivered more than 29% CAGR for 6 long years. So he was known as the best fund manager, and also recognized by both Outlook as well as Value Research. So Dheeraj, welcome on the show of Ask the Expert.
Thank you, Vikas. Thanks for having me. My pleasure.
Yeah. So Dheeraj, the format of the show is very simple. As I mentioned that, we get an opportunity to interact with various portfolio managers. So today we've invited you. So whole idea of inviting you is to understand more from you in terms of how do you look at equities, what's your approach, and how do you manage and we'll also try and understand that how do you manage to deliver these sort of extraordinary returns for long period of time. So today the idea is to learn more from you, your mantra of investing in equity markets. So over to you, Dheeraj.
Thanks, Vikas. So, of course, I'll try to take as much time as possible in giving our investment approach and philosophy. See, basically, in market is an ocean of universe of stocks, and there are more than 7,000 listed companies. And what we have seen in the institution category is there are people chasing a handful of number of companies. There are large companies or there are mid-cap companies. But at best, I mean, 90% of the fund concentration is on, those companies which have attained some kind of threshold of a market cap, or there is already part mutual fund existence in some of those companies. And there are plenty of companies which are waiting to get recognized. So we try to have our framework, which is a very fundamental approach to investing, and it is completely a buy and hold strategy. Of course, patience plays a very important role in our investment. We have to go through the grind of the volatility of the market, but very importantly, there is a fundamental approach to investing, which means there are three things importantly that we look at. One is the business itself. What is the kind of business? When we say business, it can be termed as a sector or an industry. The other thing is the management quality, and third is the valuation. So these three are very important ingredients to evaluate, to understand whether the business has longevity, whether the company has longevity. They may not get disrupted from time to time, and they will have scalable business model, which means they can keep on growing time after time, so that you get the power of compounding. So there are several character of business. When I talk about business or industry or sector, just like we human beings are very different in our character, even businesses and sectors are very different. For example, an auto ancillary or an auto company may be very different from a banking business, may be very different from a cement, or in engineering, or in IT and telecom. So every business or sector is very distinct in terms of the characteristic. So what we look at before we identify that as far as a stock selection approach is concerned or an investment approach is concerned, are various things in the business itself, whether the quality of business is good, whether the character of business is good. And what are the things that we look at? So we look at whether the size of the market opportunity is big enough. I mean, it's better to buy a small fish in a big pond rather than big fish in a small pond. So as the market size of opportunity is big enough in a sector, it becomes a durable opportunity for investing for growth. And it is not limited by the market size as such. So whether it's a pharmaceutical industry, financial services, consumer businesses, now chemicals, auto, I mean, these are very big size of market opportunity industries. And there is an ability for several companies to grow and prosper. So rather than buying into any sector which has only a market size of very limited in terms of quantum, it's better to buy businesses which has very high size of opportunity or huge size of opportunity. And this is not just restricted to India specific, it is restricted to global market as such. We know how technology has compounded over the last 2.5 decades because the market size is huge, whether it's US technology consumption or the Europe or even in India, which is still at a nascent stage. So I think the digitization, thanks to that, I think you are only seeing acceleration in the market size increasing for IT sector as well. So the market size of opportunity has to be big enough to make a compounding level of returns. The other things that we look at in character of business before we believe that this can be bought for 3 years, 5 years, 7 years is whether the economics of the business is good, which means whether the cost side of the equation is fine, whether the company has pricing power, etc. So that the business enjoys or the company enjoys a very durable competitive advantage on the cost side of the equation or on the pricing side, and the profitability can be fairly predictable. Now, typically in cyclical industries, whether it's a steel or any other cyclical companies, the profitability can vary. So we may generally have a very tactical allocation to trade in and get out, but we can't have a very durable approach of buy and hold strategy. So typically a core part of our portfolio has to be in those companies and businesses where we believe that the economics of the business is stable. In fact, the margins will only rise because of some operating leverage potential. The element of fixed cost is there, and the scale, as the business scales up higher and higher, the company will be able to enjoy higher profit margins. So this is on the economics and profitability that we look at very, very seriously and closely. We like to have companies in our portfolio which have very serious cost competitive advantage, whether in terms of backward integration benefits, raw material synergies, etc., etc. So that's a other part of business character we look at. The third is that business has to have entry barriers. Now, entry barriers again can be in the form of many things in terms of whether the cost side, where the company has competitive advantage, or pricing, or brand, which plays a very important role, or a location specific. So any of the business where we believe has very serious entry barrier, including government regulation, can be a very positive character of a business for long-term investment opportunity. The other thing that we look at very closely is whether the business is sustainable in character. We are living in a very, very dynamic and volatile, disruptive world. So it's extremely important to say that, whether this business will continue to exist after 3, 5, 10 years as well, and they will be sustainable in nature. And today, the longevity of businesses has shrunk because of disruptions, innovations, digitization, and whatever you call it. So I think it's very important, or even the green technology or green evolution. A lot of companies globally are looking at if the companies are generating very high fossil fuel and they may not be sustainable over a period of time. I mean, they may not be worthy to look at from long-term investing. So sustainability part of a business character is extremely important to us. The other things that we look at is the predictability. Again, I mean, a cyclical business cannot be predicted easily because they have volatile characteristics. But if there are certain businesses where we believe can be very predictable, I mean, we should know what we are buying into and what will happen over the next 3 to 5 years in these businesses or companies. So if the business is predictable, we don't want to buy something which is very exotic, untested, startups kind of thing where technological disruptions can happen in no time. And I think that's where maximum number of people tend to lose money in buying exotic businesses, fads and fashions of the market. So we would rather buy something where we believe we can predict as far as the company's character of business is concerned. The other thing, obviously, are very important ingredients that we evaluate and which finds merit as part of our investment portfolio is whether the business generates cash flows. Now, when we talk about cash flow, it is not just the accounting profit. I mean, people tend to inflate accounting profit at the cost of higher working capital, higher receivables, higher inventory, etc., etc. I mean, those things can be fudged. But very important to look at very closely the cash flow generation by the business. And that means after working capital, whether the business is generating sufficient cash flow to expand into the future by its internal accrual strength. And that's the most important character that we look at in a business. So as long as the business is generating cash flow, it is self-sufficient rather than buying on borrowed capital to grow over a period of time. So we look at this character again very closely, whether the business has very high working capital cycles or low working capital cycles. The other thing, which is finally a very important part, is that the business should be growing in nature. I mean, we like companies where the growth is assumed to in a compounded fashion over a period of time. If the business doesn't grow, obviously it can be value stock, which can only have a one-time re-rating. But if we have to really compound our money or investor wealth, it's extremely important that the growth has to be sustainable, and that's where you get the power of compounding. And finally, after all these analysis, it's extremely important that we understand the risk in a business. Not every business will have some element of risk. Nothing will be 100% foolproof. As I said, we are living in a dynamic world, so we need to monitor these things very closely and understand what is the risk that we are taking commensurate with the reward expectation by investing in a company. So all in all, this is on the business. On the management quality, again, it is demonstrated by some past track record in terms of the corporate governance standards, dividend payout ratios, whether there are any red flags in terms of siphoning of money or floating any group company in the interest of promoter family, but not in the interest of minority shareholders. I think that evaluation is an extremely important thing. So if the company has some element of existence, then we can obviously conquer this management quality based on some past track record. But it is very difficult for a new company to evaluate management quality because there is no demonstrated track record. And that is where the relevance of high risk on management quality or betting on management quality lies. So we would rather play the game where we know that the management is ethical because of several characters that they have demonstrated, whether in terms of dividend payout ratio, their skin in the game, in terms of high promoter holding or stake in the company. And they are doing everything in the interest of organization, whether it is flowing back or buyback of shares or flowing back money into the company, etc., providing sufficient capital. So those are the things where we evaluate management quality very closely. And finally, it boils down to the valuation, the V part. After discussing the B by business, M, the management, and V is again a critical component. And it's very important because the valuation can get exaggerated in no time, even for good company with good business and good management. And there could be prolonged time correction or prolonged element of correction, which the investor has to bear if he or she is overpaying for the level of in terms of valuation that the company is being owned. So we have to ensure that the business is not overpaid when you are investing. And the valuation tool that we look at is again based on the cash flows over a period of time that the business can assume to generate. It is not the valuation just about price to earnings multiple. PE is actually a very distorted ratio. It's very simple to calculate, but PE is based on just 1 year of earnings, that too on the earnings, which is not on the cash flow, versus a DCF basis, which is more difficult and complicated to compute because there are several assumptions that go in computing of DCF, but at the same time, it gives you a more logical answer to the fact that whether there is sufficient margin of safety in the business that you're owning versus a PE ratio, simply speaking. So by and all, I think these are the things that we look at very closely, because to evaluate whether we are buying the right business, the right management quality, and with the right margin of safety, so that we are not overpaying as far as the owning the stock is concerned.
Sure, Dheeraj, thank you so much. So before we move on to the next question, which is our topic of the day, which is emerging theme, there are a couple of questions with regards to the stock selection process that you talked about. So, for the benefit of our viewers, if you could also throw some examples on, you talked about the entry barriers, like sorry, like economic moat you talked about. So, generally, how do you find these sort of uniqueness in the business or entry barrier when you pick up these small companies or mid-sized companies?
Well, it's a very interesting question because a small company obviously will suffer from the risk element because you are being one of the first to invest in those companies as a small cap idea or a mid cap idea. And it's very important that how do you analyze these entry barriers? See, entry barriers, Vikas, can come in the form of many things. One is whether the company is, for example, very backward integrated to take cost advantage. So we understand the value chain. To what extent of the back end of the value chain the company goes into? What is the capacity that they have in terms of production? What are the other cost advantage that it enjoys in terms of material cost, labor cost? Whether the business, because of its brand superiority, has pricing power which creates enough entry barrier. Whether the government regulation also creates an entry barrier. So that the answer lies in many things that you need to evaluate to understand whether this small cap company has sufficient entry barrier. For example, we own one of the chemical company for almost 9 years now. Since the past time, when I picked up for the first time in my HSBC days to even now, the company was demonstrating continuous innovation in adding new products, which was an import substitute product. They were supplying to agrochemicals and pharmaceutical companies. They have unique cost advantage. They have zero discharge facilities. Now, for example, pollution control is a very important thing that is happening in chemical business or any other business. And they had this pollution control board license to set up a plant, and they demonstrated zero discharge liquid facilities, and they were able to scale up time after time to both local and global companies. So that showed that they had enough entry barriers, even if it's a small company, to demonstrate the skill set of creating a manufacturing plant, which had entry barriers in the form of zero liquid discharge facilities, cost advantage because of its backward integration, and having complied with the norms of government regulations in terms of pollution control. I mean, these are some of the aspects which gives us an element that even if it's a small company, they can have sufficient capability to have entry barrier and pricing power and be in the compliance of government regulation. And because just to tell you that fact, that company in the last 7 8 years grew from about 800 900 crores to about 8,000 to 10,000 crore. And there are several companies which have moved from 800,000 crores in the specialty chemical space, for example, to almost 20 30,000 crores. So I think we have to look at these competitive advantage, whether it's cost side of the equation, pollution control, government regulation, zero discharge liquid plants, backward integration, to identify these companies. Some of these things get reflected in financial numbers as well. So if I have to give you an instance, while these are qualitative aspects that we have to evaluate, it does get reflected in the form of financial numbers, in the form of profit margins, cash flows versus relative peer set or competitors.
Okay, so you are saying that these numbers clearly indicates that where the company is growing and where the segment itself is growing.
Yes, but you don't have to just rely on only quarterly numbers. You have to keep on evaluating whether these numbers are sustainable. Every quarter, the things are improving, and whether the company is generating internal cash flows to expand capacities with import substitute products, etc.
Yeah. Dheeraj, another question quickly before we come to topic is, in the portfolio management service industry per se, there are two school of thoughts which has emerged over a period of time. One says that you stick to the large cap companies which continues to grow at 15 to 20% year on year, and in the long run, stock prices is reflects in the earnings, so it mirrors the earnings basically, and you continue to make 15% 20% compounding over a long period of time, and you don't have a major drawdown. On the other school of thought is that you, like for example, portfolio manager like you stick to mid caps and small caps and look at high growth companies. So what do you think, Dheeraj? Which side of the table you think makes more money, or it is important to have an asset allocation? What is your thoughts on that?
Because without being biased, it's extremely important that from your advisory perspective or anyone, there has to be an asset allocation. For conservative investors, he will obviously choose large caps because they have demonstrated track record and they can still grow. But because they are already re-rated by the market, they've already become popular in the market, they will not give you popular returns. And as you said rightly, the returns will be modest to the tune of 15 to 20%. And even that is a good return when you compare with relative asset classes. Not to take away the fact that there are merits of owning large cap companies as well. But the other part is that there is a segment which is a large segment of the market which is under researched, under appraised, unrecognized, and that is where we, as fund managers, by evaluating them with sufficient due diligence and research work, can actually select those companies which can have phenomenal opportunity to grow over a period of time, and they can actually become mid caps and large caps of tomorrow. I mean, remember the large caps of today were yesteryear's small caps and mid caps. They all started small, right? But they have compounded over a period of time. So similarly, we are buying tomorrow's Asian Paints or tomorrow's levers of the world by investing now, and by at the same time by getting early mover advantage because they are not popular, they are not pricey, they are not expensive. At the same time, they are showing enough qualitative strength to increase the market share, to increase their competitiveness, to grow faster, and they are still attractively valued. I think this is a segment where we believe we can actually create a difference by having an early mover advantage and crafting a portfolio of small and mid cap companies.
Dhira, since you work with large organization like HSBC, which has a global footprint as well, what has been the trend? So countries which grew from $2.5 trillion to $5 trillion, $10 trillion, how has been the trend there? Is it the big became bigger over there, or you saw that good number of companies started participating? Because India cannot afford to grow with these 250 companies, which is defined by SEBI as large cap and mid cap. So India is a country which is driven by many factors. So what is your sense over there? You think that by investing in mid and small cap one can generate, I mean, provided you have good appetite of risk, so you think that you can generate a better alpha than the large cap? This is just a category wise.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I think that there is always a precedence, whether it's a global companies. We have seen that happening in Europe, where and even including US, where you have the small cap index in US doing phenomenally well on a relative basis over a period of time. The same thing has been exemplified in many of the Southeast Asian countries, where some of the small caps, the Taiwanese companies on the semiconductor side, have really scaled up time after time and given phenomenal returns. So even in India, we have seen many small cap companies as case study where they have actually become big in the last 10, 15 years, irrespective of what has happened to Nifty or Sensex as such. I mean, people tend to look at market, Sensex levels or Nifty levels. For us, it is an irrelevant thing. It only gives some direction, broad direction. But a lot of companies are outside the scope of Sensex 30 companies or Nifty 50 companies. And when you're talking about a universe of 7,000 companies, that's where the filtration is very important of identifying 20, 25, 30 companies which are in the small and mid cap category and where they can really become larger companies of tomorrow. So we have to answer your question. There is precedence, enough precedence globally, not only in India. And in terms of quantum of alpha creation can be very immense. I mean, in the past track record, we have seen, almost 5 to 15% difference versus large cap on a CAGR basis, on a year-on-year basis, which becomes a very, very meaningful number at the end of 5 to 10 years. If there is a difference of 10% per annum or 5%, even if it's 5% per annum versus large cap fund, I think that's a very strong incremental alpha CAGR at the end of 3, 5, 7 years.
Yeah, Dhira, last question from my side before we come to the topic. So, generally it has been observed, particularly in the small cap segment, that, you have years like 2018 and 19 also, where, despite knowing the fact that these companies are very strong in terms of their growth and have been growing continuously, because of the external environment, they are beaten down to the great extent of even half a times, 50%, 60%. So for a investor or for a portfolio, how important it is to time the market or to look at the exit. how do you manage that stuff at your end?
Yeah, again, excellent question, because we've all lived through very tough times of excessive market corrections and crashes in the past. But the experience shows, Vikas, is you own a company, and if you believe that they have a phenomenal opportunity over the next 3, 5, 7 years, 10 years, then you have to go through the grind of market corrections and the pains of market the panics. You can't avoid it. You can't time it. The market corrections will be very untimely. The market rallies will also be untimely. You saw last March, nobody had a clue when the market corrected, just when the COVID had its was beginning to give a lot of painful times, and we had lockdown, serious lockdown across the country. Similarly, even the rally had been very untimely all the way when it started, and the bull market got created on walls of worries. So one should not be timing at all. The only thing that one has to guard is that in euphoric times, in a very serious bull market, people tend to enter at a late stage. And that is where the short-term returns can be even negative. But if you systematically invest across the market cycles, be it a bear cycle or a bull cycle or an intermittent cycle, it doesn't matter, because if the investment into some of these companies can be generating about more than 15 to 20% on a CAGR basis. Of course, there could be 1 or 2 years where the returns could be negative. I think it more than makes up for the negative returns in a period of time. Of course, we have, this is equity market. It will never be a straight line. We have seen Lehman crisis, dot-com bubble bursting, Euro crisis in 2013, GST-led fall in 2015, and so on and so forth. Even COVID-led fall in 2020. But every time those falls have been an opportunity in disguise, and it was only a temporary window of opportunity for investors. So instead of being fearful in those panic phases, one should have been all out and been even more aggressive to invest in these markets. And the history often gets repeated. One should be taking lessons from history by looking at what had happened in the past. So in some of the small cap companies, we may have to look through the grind. At the same time, we will not say that we should not book gains if there are exotic valuations which the market offers in euphoric times. At that point of time, your discipline as a fund manager comes into play. Whether you are showing the strength of being detached from the stock that you're owning just because it has given you phenomenal returns, and you have been living with that returns and the past laurels, you have to detach yourself from that and say that, okay, this is getting too pricey, it is getting overvalued, and there are a lot of companies I may have which I can probably shift my position, which the market is ignoring it as a contrarian, because there are certain fashions and fads in the market, and that is required to be done. I mean, 2008, you saw real estate and infrastructure boom happening. You saw Unitex of the world, etc., getting into any kind of premium valuation. They did not deserve it. At that point of time, those investors who had probably taken money off the table, even if they kept on moving because of speculative reasons, and they shifted the position to more rational companies with attractive valuation, with longevity of growth over a period of time. I think they had the discipline, and they actually had resilience when the fall happened. So these are two important aspects that we look at. In some of the companies, we may have to go through the grind and pain. At the same time, in some of the companies, you have to take decision of exiting as well. It's not all or none for everyone.
Okay, so one announcement from my end. So all the participant, once again, thank you for joining in. If you have any questions, so you may start typing in Q&A box. In the meantime, I'm going to discuss the today's topic with Dheeraj. So Dheeraj, we talked about the emerging themes of India. So where do we stand as an economy, according to you? Because you've seen global companies growing, then you saw their degrowth happening, then you again saw that some of them, sort of, especially in the UK zone, they kind of separated from Brexit, etc., and then started growing. So where do you think, where are we as an economy, A, and which are the global, I mean, the emerging themes which can play an important role as far as Indian economy is concerned, and where our investors can make maximum returns?
Okay, so there are a few things. I'll probably just highlight briefly on the economy. See, obviously, COVID has been kind of a setback to certain level of industries, where obviously it is testing time for them. So whether it is some of the multiplexes, restaurants, um, and those companies have businesses have got impacted. But there are several other businesses which are seeing acceleration of growth thanks to COVID. So obviously, whether it is digitization, whether it is shift from unorganized to organized, and I'll come to those themes. So that there are two different aspects which is happening. One end of the market, one end of the economic of or the business is obviously suffering, but one end of the economy or businesses are actually thriving and growing with accelerated pace. So we believe that the earnings momentum of many companies are likely to sustain with further revival in the economy. Of course, there are certain cost pressures. You may see some decline in margins, but there is something which is happening where government has been focusing on capex spending, capital expenditure spending, in a big way. I mean, they announced a production-linked incentive scheme for the first time after many years, and this is almost to the tune of 2 lakh crore over the next 5 years. So that kind of spending, which means that there'll be more localization, more local production waiting to happen in the country. So we believe long-awaited private investment cycle will improve because nothing has happened in India's manufacturing sector in the last 10, 15 years or so. I mean, a lot of companies in the Southeast and China obviously have really gone ahead because of subsidies and incentives given by the respective governments. So I think PLI is a welcome step on the government, on the part of government to reduce the cost side, to give them incentive to have more local production and base, and that will also help job creation indirectly. The other thing is that obviously corporate capex is looking up again after 2 years of continuous decline, irrespective of the PLI scheme. And we believe a lot of sectors will drive investments. So our sense is that I think India's time for manufacturing has come, driven by government's PLI scheme of close to 1.97 lakh crore over the next 5 years. Besides, there are other factors like anti-dumping duty adopted locally, while there is China plus one strategy is being adopted globally. So government's thrust on import substitution is likely to play out well for the next many, many years through this anti-dumping duty or PLI scheme. I think that's one thing. Many sectors, because of this, where we have identified are looking very interesting, whether it is electronic manufacturing, medical devices, mobile phone manufacturing, auto ancillary, chemicals, metals, and even defense. And also, we believe that earnings of capital goods companies are at cyclical lows and can actually improve significantly as the capex cycle picks up. So these are the things which are happening where we believe over the next 3 to 5 years, 7 years, India's manufacturing time has come because thanks to localization, import substitution, anti-dumping duty which has been levied, including government's PLI scheme, and globally anti-China climate, which means not they will not reduce the element of Chinese purchase, but they also want an alternate destination to procure the global companies. So India obviously becomes a kind of will get a fair chance to have element of exposure of more outsourcing to those global companies. Now, just to give one example, we saw there are 1,000 units manufacturing tiles in Morbi, a place in Gujarat, and they have tremendous cost competitive advantage in terms of production of vitrified tiles, wall tiles, and such kind of products. Now, the moment there has been anti-China dumping duty, which was levied by US, you saw a lot of exports happening out of this Morbi into those markets in export market. I think this is just one example which is happening, and as a result of it, the local guys who are facing Morbi competition has suddenly become more active to supply in the domestic market. So this is just one example that is happening. Now, coming to a lot of emerging business themes, which is the topic of the day, I may just list down 5 or 6 such themes where we believe they are not only just new businesses, but also the old businesses which will actually come back very sharply after their poor performance in the past. So let me just list down one by one, and after that, I'll probably also summarize through my sharing of the slide. So one is the theme on the global anti-China sentiment, which is resulting in China plus one strategy, for which will increase outsourcing from India apart from other non-Chinese destinations. I think this may benefit sectors which includes pharmaceutical, chemicals and APIs, which is active pharmaceutical ingredients, or which used to be called as bulk drugs many years back, technology companies, home furnishing companies, floor tiles to garments, autos, precision engineering products. Now, just to take an example of only specialty chemical, it is what pharma business was 20 years back. I mean, they supply to, they're the building blocks to several sectors, whether it is pharmaceutical, agrochemical, personal care like flavors, fragrance, color. So these are all specialty chemical companies which are supplying to several verticals. is an area where we like, because there is a continuous business shift from China due to pollution control norms, or also expected China plus one strategy to have India as an alternate supply source. So there is a huge amount of capex is happening in the specialty chemical business, which is an indicator of growth that is likely to happen in this entire spectrum. So we like the specialty chemical business, and we believe what pharma has done in the last 20 years will be repeated through specialty chemical businesses over the next 10, 15, 20 years. I'm not talking about commodity chemicals. They may have their share of volatility. I'm talking about more predictable specialty chemical businesses where they supply to agrochemicals, pharmaceutical, and personal care as a category. So this is on the anti-China sentiment, which will divide this part of the business. The other is the import substitution that we already talked about. That is again likely to play out over several many years uh, through raising of anti-dumping duty or PLI scheme. So that this is again where India's manufacturing time has come, as I mentioned earlier, and this will play out over several years. So companies that will benefit in the manufacturing cycle because of PLI scheme and incentive include, as I just for the sake of repetition, it includes electronics, medical devices, mobile phones, autos, chemicals, metals, and defense. The third theme or the emerging business theme where we are all party to is the digitization wave. I mean, I think the e-wave, e-commerce, online payments, gateways, etc., have picked up tremendously thanks to COVID. It's an acceleration that has happened, and I think and we can see lot many companies or businesses, whether it's in the technology services or technology platform providers, e-commerce companies, along with various verticals in retail lending and insurance, will benefit out of the digitization wave. So this is another area where we believe emerging business can really prosper out of digitization. It'll be a great driver for consumption of even gadgets and gaming. I mean, this is also part of the digitization wave. The other thing that we like is the shift from unorganized to organized. Now, India has a very large parallel unorganized market. And what has happened again because of this COVID environment, I think the organized players will accelerate their gain of market share at the cost of unorganized players who had low scale of operations and could not really have deep pockets to survive this pandemic. So the deep pocketed organized players are gaining market share in a post COVID era, which will be positive for several organized companies in sectors like branded apparels, plywood companies, footwear, jewelry retailing, staffing services. So there are a lot of companies which are listed across these sectors. I think for compliance reasons, we can't name the companies, but there are several such companies in many of these categories where an investor can find that the organized players in several such sectors will continue to benefit over a period of time at the cost of unorganized players. The fifth is health and hygiene consumption, which is another emerging area, which is high growth driven by spending on, and a lot of consumers are spending on branded products, packaged food, nutrition, and healthcare. I think that's an again emerging area of business. A lot of companies are there which are into nutrition and healthcare. Some of them either in the form of FMCG or some of them are in the pharma category, who are suppliers to the consumer companies or the branded food processing companies. So I think health and hygiene is another area of theme where one has to look at the companies as far as the business longevity is concerned. The other thing that we like and we really believe that globally it is being adopted is the green technology and automation. I mean, there are players, though there are very few listed players in the Indian stock market listed world, but globally we are seeing there is increased level of automation, artificial intelligence, which has happened, and there are several listed and startup companies who have also who are also growing pretty well. Renewable energy will also qualify as part of the green technology. I mean, the world is growing green from recycling and power generation to organic groceries. Everyone, it seems, including climate change scientists, businesses, consumers, and politicians, is interested in easing the burden humanity is placing on the environment. So globally, you are actually seeing nations have come together with a commitment to reducing carbon emission or carbon footprint, And this is a very, very durable and elongated opportunity. I mean, one can invest with several players in the ecosystem that contribute to this. I mean, it could be renewable energy in the form of wind power or solar, electric vehicles, auto ancillary companies that supply to electric vehicle manufacturers, ethanol-based capital goods or sugar companies as well may qualify as part of the green energy. We all know blending in petrol is mandated to be increased from levels of about 7 to 8% to almost 20% by 2025. And I think that means almost 3 times capacity of ethanol generation has to be created over the next 3 4 years itself. Again, tremendous business opportunity as far as this green energy is concerned. Besides businesses in pollution control equipment for air or water or soil, waste reduction can also qualify here and can provide a very durable business opportunity. So these are some of the themes that we have talked about. If you can allow me, Vikas, to just share the screen
Yeah.
as a summary, uh, then I can actually take it through the themes that I've spoken about, because there are plenty of ideas and themes that I have talked about. I can just summarize it.
I think I've already given you right.
Okay. So in a nutshell, if I have to just start with the fact that
Yeah, we'll come to that just
over the
quickly.
next 10 years, I mean,
So everybody, if you have
yeah,
a question, please type in your question. So post his slides. We'll start asking these questions to Dheeraj. Yeah. Over to you, Dheeraj. Thank you.
yeah. So just to summarize, I mean, I'll start with the fact that, sorry, I'm scrolling the slide. The first thing that you asked about investment approach and what are the things that one should be looking at before investing in a company. These are the several tick boxes that we look at before identifying any investment idea into the portfolio. It starts with huge size of opportunity, economics, operating leverage potential, pricing power, entry barrier, government regulations, competitive advantage, sustainability of business, predictability of business, cash flow generation versus whether the business is working capital or asset intensive or capital intensive. Growth is an important element, and understanding risk. On some of the themes that we talked about are, I'll just take you through one by one. This is where it is just Department of Telecommunication talked about looking at alternatives to China for importing telecom equipments, and they identified other countries apart from China, which include Japan, South Korea, etc. And the Department of Telecommunication was to import from these countries or manufacture locally. And this is a thing which is happening across the globe where people are looking at alternatives to China. So on the right hand side, we talked about the sectors which will benefit from China plus win strategy, which includes chemicals, pharma, APIs, technology, home furnishing equipment players, whether those are in the bedding business, curtains, etc., garments, auto precision, and engineering products. This is on the import substitution, where we believe PLI scheme and import tariff with lower energy and labor cost is making a lot of Indian companies competitive in the global ecosystem. And on the right hand side, the sectors which will benefit include electronics, medical devices, chemicals, and other areas. Data revolution, I talked about digitization. We all know how we have been consuming more digital sitting at home. And I think several sectors on the right hand side that I mentioned will benefit, whether it's technology service providers, data security companies, e-commerce and online beneficiaries like retail, logistics, BPO, lending and insurance. And these are lending and insurance and BPO are in the online stage that I'm talking about, not the offline one. So lot of lending is happening online. A lot of insurance products are sold on the online side. So those are the companies which will actually see acceleration from the existing offline model itself. The changing consumer habits. I mean, there are certain consumer habits which are also changing and bringing a lot of new emerging businesses. So the people are shifting to large format retail stores. Of course, now the retail stores are shut, but there is a shift from small time stores to large format retail. As we see opening up of the economy, shutdown reducing, you will see again crowding happening at the large format retail stores. Exchanges, whether it's online exchange, brokering exchange, power exchanges, I think that's again a very good digital business opportunity. People are shifting and migrating to online version. Uh, Personal mobility, people want to have their own personal transport versus public transport thanks to COVID. Branded products, packaged food, nutrition, healthcare, gadgets, and gaming. I mean, these are the new businesses which are emerging out of changing consumer habits. This is where hinterland is rising, the villages and the tier 2, tier 3 cities. We believe the rural FMCG market can actually become much higher from what it has been 4 years back. I mean, it will be almost 3 to 4 times. Here, the sectors which will benefit or include farm mechanization. I think that's again a big thing because the farmers are seeing a lot of labor migration, shortage of labor to work on farm fields, and the new generation of farmer doesn't want to work on field. So I think farm mechanization, whether in the form of tractors, tillers, any equipment which will support the farmer in soil cultivation or harvesting, will be big business opportunity. The farmers are adopting this farm mechanization in a big way. Shift to organized, whether it's branded products, footwear, jewelry, staffing services, will be the ones to benefit. And here, these are the areas where we believe R&D companies in the e-commerce, platform companies, food technology, and renewables will make the most of it over the next 5 to 10 years. Yeah, because I'm done with the slide as a summary.
Okay. All right. So we can then open the forum for Q&A, Dheeraj.
Yeah, please.
Okay. So the first question is, Indian markets is doing well despite of second wave. I suspect that this is due to loose monetary policy by the Fed. How much risk does the Indian market carry due to loose monetary policy by the US?
Very important question. I think that has been one of the triggers for the Indian markets to participate. The emerging market has actually seen the influx of FII flows thanks to very loose monetary policy and low yields which is prevailing in the developed markets. So we will definitely see acceleration of flows into the emerging markets, whether it's in the form of ETF funds or FII flows through other routes. And if the global interest rates, at this point of time, we believe that the Fed will continue to support because of the COVID situation, and they want to ensure that the job creation happens because even US had suffered from job losses. So a lot of trillions of dollars are being paid to the hands of US consumers. So we don't believe it's going to change till 2023. And I think that is the point of time where we believe maybe market will peak out. Though the stock specific case will continue to exist in Indian market, but broadly speaking, this will be a risk that we should talk about somewhere in 23. Of course, even now we will see that market will have its share of time correction or some corrections, but those will be short-lived in nature to our mind, and that should be taken as an opportunity. So buy on declines will continue to be favored if you want to make money over the next 2 to 3 years.
Okay. And the question is, what should be the holding period one should look at while investing in your portfolio?
Ideally, 3 years, that's the minimum, because some small and mid caps need to be nurtured. For them to become a larger company, you need to give time. You can't expect returns to happen in 3, 6 months' time, or even a 1 year period is too short. I mean, in a serious bull market, you can actually make money even in 1 year time. But those companies should be bought with a longer term perspective as far as we as fund managers or analysts are concerned. And even the investors should have reasonable expectation to give time for these companies to grow and create wealth. So ideal time is anywhere between 3 to 5 years as far as the investment horizon is concerned.
Okay, so you can type any question in Q&A box. So in the meantime, I'm asking another question. So Dheeraj, do you think that the fantasy gaming app like Dream 11 MPL will consistently do good considering that it is somewhere new business opportunities in India?
So gaming and gadgets is definitely a new business opportunity. And the new generation is hooked on to gadgets and gaming in terms of the time that they are devoting. Of course, with restriction of outdoor sports and with mobile easily accessible in every teenager's hand, of course, this is a business which will take off. Now, I'm not recommending these companies that you have mentioned because we are living in a world where there is a lot of hope and valuation excessiveness already built into many of such companies. And while the sector will do well because they are at a nascent stage, and we believe that digitization will mean gaming and gadget business should do well. And gaming is just video gaming, online gaming has not even reached the tip of the iceberg. But to buy an incubating company, a very small company with literally no financials right now, and to expect and already overpay well in advance will not be a right discipline. I don't know so whether it answers your question, but yes, the sector looks very interesting, but one has to be guarded against paying excessive premium already in advance to some of those companies in a euphoric time.
Okay. And the other question is, what kind of companies that you invest? Which cap, like large cap, mid cap, small cap? That's a question from Mr. Praveen Wable.
So 65 to 70% of our portfolio will qualify in the small cap. It can be even a 300 crore market cap company to a 10,000 crore market cap company. Almost 25% of our portfolio will be in the mid cap, which can be beyond 10,000 to 30,000 crore, or maybe 10,000 to 25,000 crore market cap. And the balance 5-10% can be in the large cap. Not necessarily in that order. It is just an outcome as we speak currently. But if we believe that if we like almost 100% of the company in the small cap category, we will buy 100% of the portfolio in small cap.
And what is your churning ratio, Dheeraj?
Very minimal, well within the regulatory norms, less than one, I would say. But if we believe that some of the companies have moved up 3 or 5 times in a short span, well ahead of time, because it's a very fast market and very vociferous bull market, where we have got 3 years earnings valuations already well in advance, and we have alternate opportunity waiting in the sideline, which is obviously reasonably priced and attractively priced, then at that point of time we take a relative view to sell our current holding. Otherwise, we generally stay put and retain our investments.
Okay. How do you deep dive and understand market opportunities is huge or not for the company? That's a question from Harsh.
So market opportunity can be computed based on the addressable market itself. What is the addressable market? For example, pharma can be a huge opportunity, more than 70, 80, $100 billion generic opportunity just in US alone. So you have to quantify the size of market opportunity based on the fact that total number of large companies, what they are currently generating in the form of sales, what is the addressable opportunity globally as well, how they can grow over a period of time, this sector or an industry or a business, and 3 or 5 years down the line, whether the size can become bigger over time. So when I mentioned when one of the slides, a rural market in 2016 was $29 billion FMCG opportunity, which is expected to become $100 billion. That's the size of market opportunity for an FMCG company who is willing to go into the rural territory or tier 2, tier 3 cities. So this is what you need to quantify. The larger the size of the market opportunity, the better is for the companies to grow time after time and to get the power of compounding.
Okay. So the question is, will you be able to share some literature on the PMS fund or rather than detailed PPT? So yeah, let me share that. We will be sharing the details, performance, product PPT, etc. Because we share, the reason behind sharing the PPT is because you can pick up whatever information that you wish to pick up, because it's a very detailed one. So we'll be sharing that only with you. And of course, followed by that, we'll also be sharing the performance with you. The other question is from Mr. Gupta. He's asking the next 5 years, which single sector is expected to appreciate the maximum?
Difficult to point a single sector, but if I should to put gun on my head and talk about it, I would still bet on specialty chemicals business, where we believe that the market size is big. They have become globally cost competitive. There are a lot of capex is happening in the sector. They are catering to agrochemicals, pharma, fragrances, flavors, color segment, which are in the essential category. Either it's a food category or pharma category or an agriculture category, and they are scaling up a lot of. And there's an element of stickiness in the specialty chemical business, because a lot of global companies to whom these companies supply their product, they will not change their vendors easily. So I would probably stick my neck out and say that it'll be a very serious compounding story how pharma has been in the last so many years.
Okay. The other question is from Venkat. He's asking that small and mid cap companies are risky. So how does the PMS ensure that we have safety? We have a safety net.
So Venkat, I think I will address this question. It is a myth that there is a level of risk in the small and mid cap. Small and mid cap can be volatile, but not necessarily companies will be at risk. If you see, even the large companies in the past have been risky. You saw what has happened to Junitech, Jayprakash Associates, and several large companies, including Yes Bank, which became a large company. So it's not that the large companies don't destroy wealth or don't lead to capital depreciation, and even those can become zero. And some of the small companies which are of high quality in terms of management skin in the game, and I mentioned all those factors, the cash flow characteristics, the ability to generate high return on capital employed, the sustainability of growth, etc. If they are doing tremendously well, those are high quality small and mid cap companies which may be less risky than some of the large companies which don't have any of these characteristics. So it is not the size of the company that determines the risk. Of course, there is some element of safety in a large company because they have already demonstrated track record. But many of the large companies have also ceased to exist in the last 5, 10 years. And some of the small and mid cap companies have become large companies of tomorrow. So don't go by the size of the company, go by the quality of the business, character of business, understanding the balance sheet to understand whether it's a risky company or not.
Yeah, any recent or upcoming listed company you are excited or looking forward to?
Many, in fact, my list is heavy to buy into those companies because, as I mentioned, there is a lot of depth in the Indian market as far as listing universe is concerned. There are 7,000 companies, and there are a lot of companies with excellent management quality who are scaling up their business, taking on market share, growing it well, improving their corporate governance standards, etc., etc. And as I mentioned, India's time on the manufacturing has also come. So we believe capital goods and manufacturing will be another area apart from specialty chemicals over the next 5 years, which will do well. So I can only talk about these two segments than companies per se.
Yeah. The other question is from Mr. Yadav. He's trying to understand that what do you think? How much is the time left out before EV flourish in India? Is it worth to invest in some of the companies like Tata's and Mahindras, which are entering into this business?
See, these companies are entering. For them, even if they produce an EV vehicle, whether it's cars or two-wheelers, it's going to be still a small portion of EV in their entire pie of manufacturing. So they will still be considered as an older generation versus a company which is only producing EV and they have no legacy of non-EV products of cars or two-wheelers. So yes, these people are investing heavily. They have the R&D and deep pockets to scale up with distribution franchise. And one can look at it, but not just for EV. You're looking and buying them also because the auto sector and the personal mobility is rising and they have competitive cost advantage. Their designs are better. They know the Indian market well. They may be cyclical as far as commercial vehicle is concerned, but cars and two-wheelers are still a stable and under-penetrated market in India. So you are buying them also for their legacy product apart from EV product, not just because of EV.
Understood. So last question from Mr. Amol Deval. What's your views on gold as an asset class?
No view. I only breathe, sleep, and eat equities. So I can only talk about equities. I'm so sorry for that.
Sure, sure. Point taken. All right, Dheeraj. So thank you so much for joining the call and answering all the questions so patiently. So thank you so much once again. I
Thank
also
you,
take
Vikas.
this opportunity to thank Gautam for helping us to organize this session, and we look forward to work closely with you.
Thank you so much. It was my pleasure, Vikas, with all the good and nice questions that y'all had. Thank you very much.
Thank you, participant, for joining in. We'll be sharing those who could not join. We'll be sharing the recording, so you can visit our YouTube channel, AIF and PMS Experts India, and there we would be uploading the session. And in case you have any more questions for me, Dheeraj, or for Gautam, please feel free to write me at vikas@aifpms.com. We've also sent out an email to you with the registration details of the Zoom call, and we will help you answer all those questions. All right. Thank you. Thank you once again.